If you're over 60 and living on a fixed income, pay attention. 3 separate federal policies are converging right now, and each one has the ability to shrink the money you count on every single month. One touches your Social Security check directly. One involves an old debt some of you forgot you even had. And one decides whether you can keep getting help paying for groceries. Let's break down all 3, one at a time. None of these 3 stories tend to arrive as one big dramatic headline. They usually show up as a smaller number on a bank statement or a letter that's easy to set aside without reading closely. Let's go through what's actually confirmed about each one and what generally exists for people who want to respond to it. Change number 1. Social Security offsets for defaulted federal student loans are expected to restart around this July. Here's the background. Back in 2020, the federal government froze collection efforts on defaulted federal student loans as part of pandemic relief. That freeze meant your Social Security check couldn't be touched to repay that debt. Since then, the Department of Education has tried to restart collections more than once, paused again under public pressure, and tried again. A genuine back and forth that's confused even people who follow this closely. As of now, the tool used to do this, called the Treasury Offset Program, has been paused while the department rolls out a new repayment option tied to something called the Repayment Assistance Plan, which is scheduled to launch around July 1st of this year. Borrowers who don't enroll in that plan or otherwise resolve their default status could see offsets resume after that point. 2 things tend to surprise people about this one. First, it's not limited to loans someone took out for their own education. Parent PLUS loans. The ones some parents and grandparents took out to help a child or grandchild through school. Work the same way. If that loan is in default, it's tied to the cosigner's Social Security number, not just the student's. Second, plenty of people simply forgot the debt existed after roughly 5 years of it sitting frozen. When active, federal rules allow up to 15% of a monthly Social Security benefit to be withheld, with a protected floor that's supposed to leave a beneficiary with at least $750 a month, a number that, notably, hasn't been adjusted since the 1990s. One government estimate puts the number of Social Security recipients aged 62 and older who could be affected at roughly 450,000. Generally speaking, established paths exist for people in this situation. Things like loan rehabilitation, where a borrower makes a series of agreed-upon payments to bring a loan out of default, consolidation, or a hardship-based request to reduce or pause an offset for someone who can document that it would create serious financial strain. None of these happen automatically. They typically require reaching out to a loan servicer or the Department of Education directly. Change number 2. Social Security overpayment clawbacks are still being withheld at a much higher rate than a few years ago. This one isn't brand new this month, but it's still actively affecting people, and plenty of viewers haven't caught up on what changed. An overpayment happens when the Social Security Administration determines it paid someone more than they were owed. Sometimes because of a change in income, sometimes because of the agency's own administrative or calculation error. For a while, the default recovery rate on these overpayments was capped at 10% of a person's monthly check. That changed in 2025. The withholding rate briefly jumped to 100% of a beneficiary's check, drew significant public criticism, and was then reset to a default of 50%. And that 50% rate still applies to most new Title II overpayment notices, retirement, survivor, and disability benefits today. SSI overpayments are handled separately and remain at a 10% default. Picture someone in their 70s opening a letter that says they were overpaid years ago, with no clear memory of anything changing on their end, and now half their monthly check is at stake to pay it back. Generally, people in this position aren't without options. There's typically a window, commonly cited as around 90 days, before withholding actually begins. Within that window, a beneficiary can request a lower withholding rate if the standard amount would create hardship, or file an appeal and a waiver request if they believe the overpayment wasn't their fault or shouldn't have happened at all. Filing within that window can pause collection while the case is under review. These requests are handled directly through the Social Security Administration using specific SSA forms. Change number 3. SNAP work requirements now reach further into the 55-64 age group. The third change involves food assistance. Under the tax and spending law signed in 2025, sometimes called the One Big Beautiful Bill, the age range for SNAP's work requirements, formerly the ABA-DOD rules, short for able-bodied adults without dependents, was expanded. It used to stop in the mid-50s. It now extends up to age 64, with people 65 and older remaining exempt. States have been rolling this out in phases since late 2025 into 2026, with compliance deadlines landing at different times depending on the state. In practice, someone in their late 50s or early 60s who used to be automatically exempt from proving work activity may now need to document around 80 hours a month, roughly 20 hours a week, of work, approved job training, or volunteering to keep receiving benefits. Groups tracking this, including the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, have estimated that more than 1 million older adults in the 55 to 64 range could be affected. Exemptions still exist. Generally, people may still qualify for one if they're medically unable to work, if they're caring for a dependent, like a young grandchild or an incapacitated family member, or if they already receive disability benefits such as SSI or SSDI. Once someone turns 65, the work requirement no longer applies at all. The catch is that these exemptions typically need to be documented and filed with a state SNAP office. They don't kick in automatically just because someone happens to qualify. All three of these share a pattern. They tend to move quietly, and the people most affected are usually the ones who didn't realize there was a form to file or a window to act within, not the people who genuinely had no options at all. To recap, Social Security offsets for defaulted federal student loans, including for cosigners of parent PLUS loans, could resume for borrowers in default around July of this year. A 50% default withholding rate on many Social Security overpayment cases has been in effect since April 2025 and continues to apply. SNAP work requirements now reach up to age 64, with documentation and exemption processes handled at the state level. Quick but important note before you go. This channel is AI generated and made for educational purposes only. I'm not a licensed attorney, financial advisor, or benefits counselor, and nothing in this video is personalized, legal, financial, or tax advice. Rules like these vary by individual situation and can change again with little notice. For anything that applies to your own circumstances, please consult directly with the Social Security Administration, the Department of Education, your state SNAP office, or a licensed financial professional before making any decisions. If you know someone over 60 who this might affect, sending them this video could genuinely help them stay ahead of it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.